This is the Hagmann Hagmann Report for today. It is a fantastic Friday edition. It's Friday, June 19th, 2015. I'm Doug Hagmann at the helm with fellow investigator, researcher, and most importantly, my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann Hagmann Report, America's premier father-son investigative reporting team. We're coming to you live from the studios of the Hagmann Hagmann Report here in Northwest Pennsylvania. Folks, our job, what we are signed up to do, is to bring you the news that propels the headlines, the news that's convoluted and twisted amid this funhouse of smoke and mirrors in the carnival we call the corporate media. We do the headline and news triage so you don't have to. We want to thank each and every listener that is checking in with us and is tuning in with us. Thank you so much from all over the world. For new listeners, just want to remind everyone we broadcast live Monday through Friday, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time, right here. We're accessible via our home base on the Internet at hagmannandhagmann.com. Now, you got to spell it all out, Hagmann, the word and of course, Hagmann, repeat it twice, hagmannandhagmann.com. And I'll tell you, from there, you can access our live show, as well as all of our past shows. You just have to click on, at the moment, you have to click on the RSS feed. Where it says subscribe to the RSS feed. You don't have to subscribe. You just click on that. That takes you to our past shows page. There you can, from our home base, you can access all of our social networking sites, and most importantly, our original investigative reports. Oh, you can also access our SoundCloud files as well. We've updated them in the smaller file sizes. So if file size is an issue, that'll help you out there. Tonight, we've got a great show lined up for you. You know, boy, I'll tell you, news is moving so quickly. Christian evangelists and theologians and Bible scholars and anyone who's paying attention to the bigger picture of world events have been warning of a great deception coming to mankind. And what we need to do is we need to be able to we need to have the knowledge to fight or to be aware of what this deception is and how we will be played, and that'll help us. Of course, we turn to the Word, but we also have to depend on people who are smarter than Joe and I and others. You know, that they can tell us where to look and what to look for, and not to be deceived. So we're not deceived. But one of the gentlemen that Joe and I met when we first met, it was in Dublin, Ohio. And I've got to tell you, this man and his wife, just is a great couple. And Josh Peck is a great man, great author, very intelligent. You know, I talk to him, and I feel like I'm, you carry on a conversation with Josh Peck about his various subjects about quantum creation and Cherubim, Chariots. I mean, he's really good. He can help you understand very complex subjects, but you know, when you get deep into this, man, I just realize how much I don't know, and I have trouble living in three dimensions, and contemplating three dimensions. And Josh, of course, is writing about multiple dimensions, quantum creation, but frankly, he makes it sound easy. Josh Peck is a writer. He's the host of The Sharpening. He's the founder of Mini Study Ministry. He's a Christian and a Bible researcher with a passion for Bible prophecy. His mission is to wake up the church to the reality of the Bible. Yes, the Bible, faith, and science can coexist, in fact, complement one another, contrary to the belief system out there that they're polar opposites or opposing squares. And he also separates biblical truth from Christian tradition, which does provide the solid, uncut truth of God's Word to any and all who will listen. Before we bring Josh Peck on, and I would encourage everyone to go to hagmannandhagmann.com, click on the link to his website, Mini Study Ministry, and also hook up with him on the social networking sites as well. But before we bring him on, Joe, hey, great to have you here.
Great
in
to be
studio.
Here. Yeah, had a busy day of research and working on stuff, and we have a event coming up in D.C. called the
Celebrate America.
Celebrate America, and we were talking about what we need to do to prepare for that event, as we are going there to speak either together or individually.
Well, I guess we're going to be speaking on Monday, July 6th at 7 o'clock p.m. at the Daughters of the American Revolution in Washington, D.C. That's kind of what we know right now. Celebrate America, D.C. It's a time for patriotic Americans from across our great country to celebrate America's heritage and Constitution on the occasion of her 239th birthday. This runs from the 4th through the 11th.
Yeah.
And our time to speak is on Monday the 6th.
That'll be two times in Washington in 1 month. I think that's a little too much for us. But tonight,
it's the air. It's the water inside the Beltway.
We had Dan Duvall on Thursday, June 4th. We had Russ Dizdar on this Wednesday. And now we have Josh Peck. These three gentlemen talk about similar subjects. Russ and Dan do more the deliverance, but you, Josh, are, I would say, an expert on the mechanics of the interdimensional spiritual aspects and how they work. I know tonight we're going to cover a number of subjects such as CERN, also what you dub the
You know what?
I
cannot say that word.
Technocalypse.
Technocalypse.
He had trouble earlier. I could say it earlier. But we're going to get into that stuff. Where would you like to start today?
Well, first I want to thank you so much for having me back on the show. I've been really looking forward to, this episode in particular, and this will be my fourth time on your show, and I'm very, very grateful for every time you've had me on. And that was something I was thinking about too. Where exactly to start with all this? And in hindsight, I probably should have picked a easier word than technocalypse, but that's okay. I had trouble saying it But basically, it's a technological apocalypse. I believe that the more that I look into this stuff, the more that I believe that technology, and especially discoveries in quantum physics, because that's the most fundamental, foundational study of creation, really, that there is. I believe that a lot of these things that the world is doing outside of God is going to ramp up into something big. I think that there are a lot of prophetic implications in these things. I'm really glad to be back on the show. So while I was preparing for this, luckily my wife was able to give me some time this week to put together a list in preparation for the show of areas that I wanted to hit. I probably should mention too, I hope it's okay I do this, but my wife recently started a new business called Neshama Essentials. It's basically aromatherapy. And the reason that I mention that, not only to I'll be honest, using your show as a platform to get the word out, but also it is such a blessing. And I know that you guys have been praying for our family, which, we talked about the last time that we talked. And I really want to thank you so much for that, because my wife was she was in an awful job that really didn't take care of her dietary needs because she's hypoglycemic, and she ended up in the hospital because of it. But thanks be to God, she was able to get out of that job. She's got a better job lined up working at a bank, and she's also working from home, making her own all-natural aromatherapy products. So I just wanted to give that kind of praise be to God out there to thank you and all your listeners that have been praying for my family. So things are going good there. But luckily, she was able to take off enough time for me to prepare for this show. I don't know what it is about it, but I've been feeling that there's something extra special, extra important about this show. So, this whole week I've been really excited about it. I put together a list of topics that I want to hit, but as far as where to start, there are so many different avenues to take. And when I first started researching a lot of this stuff, it's probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and bits and pieces of the stuff we'll talk throughout the night have been I've written about in my books, Quantum Creation, Cherubim, Chariots, and even some other books before that. But I'm working on a new book now, that this will be my first traditionally published book. I was able to meet Tom Horn, and I told him my idea for a book that I wanted to get together, and he liked the idea and offered to publish it. So he and I have been in contact quite frequently because we research a lot of the similar things. The biggest thing, really, today... Oh, sorry, what was that?
Congratulations, by the way, on the new book coming out.
Oh, oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, I really believe that this book, you know, not just because I'm writing it or not anything having to do with me, but just the information that God's laying on the hearts of people today. I believe books like this are going to be really, really important in the years to come because there's so much that the enemy is doing. You know, there's so much that evil forces are doing that they get away with it because people don't understand it, or people unfortunately believe that they're in a position where they can't understand it. And you know, the science community's done a really good job of that, you know, convincing people that, you know, you're not smart enough to understand this stuff, so you have to leave it up to us to figure out, you know, if it's right or wrong. And they're doing it outside. You know, most of them don't even believe in God, so that kind of tells where their morality is going to be at. But the truth is, all of that, it's a lie. Anybody in the general public most often is going to be able to understand these concepts if they're presented in a way that they can understand. You know, the science community has almost developed a new language that we have to learn to even get our heads around what they're talking about. But the actual concepts, they're not too bad. And you know, the past 3 shows that I've you know been with you guys and talked with you guys, I hope I've been able to to show that, because you know I don't make a secret out of it. I graduated high school with a 2.6, and I only did like half a semester of college, so I'm not at all like a highly educated person or anything. But you know I believe that God is using that part of my life to show that basically if I can understand this stuff, anybody can. It just so if they're, you know, the assumption that the world will give out to, especially to the church, saying that, you know, you're too dumb or you're not smart enough to understand this, it's a complete lie. And even more so, we need to understand it because of the things that are on the horizon, which is particularly why I'm so excited about the show, to be able to talk about a lot of these things. You know, really, CERN is probably the biggest one, and even just with CERN, we could easily do a series of 10 shows just on CERN alone. There are so many avenues, and I definitely want to get into that, but I figured a good place to start, just because I don't have as much information about it right now, and it's just kind of it just helps kind of settle into all these things. Is some of the other technology that they're trying to develop on a quantum level. And when I say quantum, that basically means the smallest of the small. So there are particles like atoms or protons. You know, they're different. There are different particles, but those particles are made of what's called elementary particles, like protons are made of 3 quarks and gluons and things like that. Well, the quarks and the gluons are the actual that's quanta. So that's the elementary particles that can't be broken down anymore. Essentially, they're made of nothing, which I promise that will make sense before the end of the show. But they're developing technology. They're developing technology on this level. And when you go down to the quantum level, there's a lot of really strange things that occur. And one thing that we've talked about before is quantum entanglement. And you know, they understand that it happens, they just don't understand how. And basically what quantum entanglement is when 2 particles, like say photons, you know, the particle of light, when they're entangled, it means that they're able to, in a way, send information to one another faster than the speed of light. It's at an absolute instant, which, according to Einstein, is supposed to be impossible, which is why he wasn't a fan of quantum entanglement, or really quantum theory in general. So you could have two photons at either end of the universe, and if they're entangled, they're still able to communicate with each other at an instant. The only way that I can get my head around that something like that is possible is when higher dimensions are introduced. By accessing higher dimensions, you can travel shorter amount of, longer areas in a shorter amount of time. So there's no real good working theory right now on how quantum entanglement works or why, but they just know that it does. So what they're trying to do is develop something called quantum computing, which basically, if they were able to implement this, and I believe that they're heading there, I believe that they're trying to do this now actually at CERN. If they achieve this, computers will basically be obsolete. Whatever types of computer chips or whatever they'll build from this technology, it will work at an absolute instant. So say, if you have to wait, a few minutes to download a song or wait a couple hours to download a video, it wouldn't be like that. You would just have it instantly. There'd be no time. And that's just small scale stuff. Large scale stuff, they would have basically infinite processing power, like speed. It would be everything would be at an instant. And one of the reasons that this can be dangerous is, first, if quantum entanglement works by way of higher dimensions and we utilize that, we're essentially sending information into higher dimensions. And we don't know what's there that's going to, that could pick up the signal, so to speak. Also, another thing that's kind of dangerous is with the amount of computing power and speed that we have now, look at what the world's doing with it. I can't even imagine what it would basically be opening Pandora's box. Things like artificial intelligence, or all these things that transhumanism would explode. All these things that they're trying to do, it would increase exponentially. They'd have access to a lot of these things. So that's something that we need to watch out for. But what's actually, I just saw a news report recently out of CERN that they are, since they've increased the power, they're realizing that the computing speed that they have just isn't going to be sufficient. It was barely sufficient even before. For example, when a collision happens, they basically only keep one out of every million or so, or billion or so collisions, because they don't have the computing power to be able to analyze all of them, and there's billions and billions. So surprisingly, the Higgs boson was announced in 2012, but it's estimated that they actually had created Higgs bosons at least 100,000 times the first year that the Large Hadron Collider was even running. But they can't compute all the information, so they had to wait before they were able to actually get enough statistics to know that they had it to be able to announce it. So this is a problem for them, and they just partnered with a computer company to look more into quantum computing as an option to be able to read all this stuff. So it's kind of convenient that they have this problem, and the solution is quantum computing. So let's go out and get funding and get all this money to dump into this. So when we have it, we'll be able to discover more particles and things. So that's the first thing that we should look out for. Yes.
Just as an FYI, there seems to be like a 3 to 5 second delay, but that's no big deal. Secondly, before you get too far into this cloud computing, are you familiar with Moore's Law?
Yeah. I actually just saw something about that too. Michio Kaku did a presentation on it, where basically every year the computing power doubles or exponentially, or no, it's every 18 months, right?
It's something like that. Every year the processing power doubles, I believe, and it gets to a point where the rapid amount. You can only go so far before you reach infinity in computing.
Yeah.
world. But they see the government is working, as you said, on there's a 21st century strategy for not only cybersecurity but innovation. You have the DARPA, what you just referenced here, the robotic workforce and Army. You have the continuation of market manipulation and the ability to take control of all currency through digitization. How are these quantum computing policies and innovations, how are they, because they're sold to us as something that's good. All this new technology and innovation creates jobs, makes things easier, less burdensome. What are the dangers, if we could go like issue by issue, what are the dangers economically for moving away from a cashless society to a digital currency?
I think one of the biggest dangers is we really don't know when it comes to quantum computing. Again, it's possibly, and I say possibly because I don't think anyone knows for sure, but it's possibly using higher dimensions to be able to do these things. So what's dangerous about that is how do you secure something like that? Like how do you at least with what we have now, there's ways to build security around like our national defenses or something like that. It'd be really difficult for somebody to hack into that. It's possible, but it'd be difficult. However, if we're using higher dimensions and sending information through higher dimensions to get to somewhere else faster, how do you lock out an entire extra dimension? I mean, once that's discovered, like once that's proven and people, other people can get their heads around the science and the math behind it, it seems to me it would just be a free for all. Everyone would have access to anything. I think it would be really hard to lock that down. Again, not impossible, but it seems to me to be really difficult. Plus, all economically, like you mentioned, all the funding that would have to go into even trying to think of ways to secure a higher dimension. I have no idea what that would be, but I imagine it would cost a great price.
Okay. I saw an article yesterday or the day before talking about Wi-Fi signals. Now we know the president started with the Obama phones, and now he's moving for national.
Bush started with that, but go ahead.
Yeah, Bush to Obama. Now they're pushing for nationwide broadband or broadband in rural areas, internet access across the nation. And with this, there was an article out of some science publication that talked about, I term it or have heard it termed 4D mapping, that Wi-Fi signals, even if you don't have a computer or a cell phone in your house that's connected to it, say a couple of your neighbors do, they can map, they can count how many people are in a given area. They can basically, I don't know how to best describe it, but they can map the area, how many rooms are in a house, how many people are in a house within a specific range where the Wi-Fi is. Now, if there's international or national Wi-Fi everywhere, then they'll be able to map this all over the place. Do you understand the mechanics behind that? How this signal can not only transmit data but also map the things around it?
I haven't really looked into it. I imagine it would just be it might be in a way similar to sonar where a signal, if it's blocked in a certain way, they can map out the image. I don't know if that's exactly how it works, but that's the best way I can figure. It seems like it'd be relatively easy, for them to do. They just need to put in something to interpret the data within the router or wherever the information is being received. But yeah, as far as the mechanics of it, I could only speculate. But that is kind of interesting that they're doing that, and then that they're even doing it, in other countries that don't even necessarily have internet as widespread as we do. It's all a big control issue. We know from biblical prophecy we're heading towards a one world, governmental system. Well, for that for that to be possible, they are. I just got okay. Thank you. I just got the link you sent. But yeah, they for the one world government system to be possible, they have to be able to keep tabs on everybody, know where everybody is, because right now the hardest places to control are areas that you don't have access to, and you actually have to physically go there. If everyone's hooked up with the internet, you don't have to physically go there anymore, and especially if they're able to use the signals to keep tabs on everybody. But yeah, that's really, really interesting.
Folks, we're talking with author and researcher Josh Peck. No, it's not Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. No, it's Josh Peck. He's a real guy. I met him in Dublin, Ohio, at a conference there, and he's got a gift. He's got a gift that he's able to explain complicated things, or seemingly complicated things, in a manner in which I can understand them. And if that's the case, then I'm sure you can understand them. Yeah. Folks, his website is Mini Study Ministry. If you go to ministudyministry.com or simply hagmanhagmann.com, look on the right there, click on the link. I just want to point this out real quick here. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a very special offer of his two books. Both of them sit right here on my desk. Quantum Creation and Cherubim, Chariots 2. Both of these books. Both of them for $29.95. The reason I'm really, really hot on these books, I mean, I really like these books because, exploring the extra-dimensional hypotheses, for example, you hear about, oh, man, ETs coming to, what about the UFO phenomenon? ETs, do they exist? Baptizing aliens? You hear about all of this. Well, Josh he offers a different explanation, shall we say, among others, but he offers a different explanation there. So anyway, I'm really hot on both books. That's Quantum Creation and what he's talking about, too, does the supernatural lurk in the fourth dimension, and Cherubim Chariots, both of them for $29.95. You visit his website at Mini Study Ministry via Hagmann Hagmann and click on the link through to get his books. Man, I'll tell you what, for a belated Father's Day gift, fantastic. Trust me.
And Josh, just one more question back to the broadband. Now, seeing if we have the internet and Wi-Fi hooked up throughout we'll just say the globe, everywhere in the globe is hooked up, how would this apply to, we'll say, a dimension, a spiritual dimension? Would this have a spiritual dimension aspect to it? And could entities in the spiritual work in or through these connections?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe they're already doing that. We read in the Bible that Satan is the prince of the power of the air, and it's kind of an old interpretation. Well, in our modern day, it's kind of an old interpretation. People have been thinking about this for probably about 20, 30 years now, but it might be that that's a reference to what's the power of the air. Well, we have TV signals, radio signals, and now the most powerful of them all are internet signals. So I believe they're already doing that. But if I should say when the world switches to quantum computing, then it's going directly into higher dimensions. And whatever difficulty they have now acquiring it, I mean, it's going to be no difficulty there because we'll be sending all of our information right to the source. And I don't really know why they would have a direct interest in that. They've been around for thousands of years. What more do they need to know about us? But I think it's just because things are ramping up so fast and so exponentially. For them, it's a way to keep tabs on us and to know all of what we're doing at all times. I mean, we put our thoughts, our feelings. I mean, we put everything online. We talk to Facebook more than we talk to God, most times. So, of course, they're going to be interested in that, and they'll be able to use that, utilize that towards their own ends.
When you say they, Josh, I just want to clarify who you mean by they.
Yeah, absolutely. Extra-dimensional entities, we would say in the church, fallen angels and demons. Something that I talked about in quantum creation is that, the term extra-dimensional and spiritual really are synonymous. So these are evil, fallen spiritual entities in every sense of the word.
Okay. All right. Boy, it seems like quantum computing would open yourself up for one hell of a virus, a computer virus. And that was I said that intentionally. I said the word hell intentionally. Evil virus. Yeah. Okay. Joe, I mean, have you completed that line of questioning there?
Well, yeah. There's some things that I have that will fit in as it's relevant to other topics we're getting into. But let's get into CERN, Josh. Many people have questions, send us questions via email, calls, guests we have on, whether they're ministers or they're in some other field. People always seem to bring up CERN. It's one of the big ones now, as the Hadron Collider continues to be turned on and ramped up to higher and higher speeds. We know they accelerate particles and smash them together. They say they're looking for the, quote, God particle, and they also there's also claims that they're trying to open dimensions or portals into this dimension. One, do you believe they have the ability to open portals to other dimensions that would be able to transport entities, or entities would be able to come and go?
Yeah, yes, I do, and that was something that throughout writing this book I kind of went back and forth on, because I didn't really know. When I tackle an issue, I try to see all sides of it, and there are more claims out there that are portrayed as sensationalist, and I don't believe that they're in it for that, but they're portrayed that way by the world, that says basically the LHC is just a big interdimensional portal, and in a lot of ways, the more that I looked into the science of what they're actually doing and understood it more, yeah, in a lot of ways it is like that. But the portals that they're creating now, and this doesn't mean that they can't grow in size or that they can't, amp up the power even more to make bigger ones, but the portals that they're creating now are on a quantum scale. They're incredibly small, and right now it's to the point where basically nature is making these portals through like cosmic rays that hit the earth and things like that. So as far as right now, from what we're being told anyway, I mean, they could be doing a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes that we don't know about. But from what we're being told right now, I wouldn't think it would be anything that we would be able to travel through, or that an entity could come through yet. But I believe it is heading that way. But what they could do, though, and this is something that they're talking about, is there at CERN, the physicists could use particles such as gravitons to create a type of binary to send a message through. And there's actually a documentary. I have it linked in my blog. If people go to my website, they can find my blog and then look at the CERN series. There's a documentary where a popular physicist, Brian Greene, who I really like his work, I think he's brilliant, but he hosted this documentary, and he talked about how possibly in the future that they might use gravitons to send messages to higher dimensions and see if anything communicates back. Now that's something that they could potentially do now if they figure out how to utilize gravitons. So yeah, I believe in the future, if they keep doing what they're doing, maybe not with the LHC because it has certain limitations unless they build it up more. But they're planning for a future collider. It'll be called the ILC. It'll be a linear collider instead of a circle like the LHC is. Possibly in Japan they're looking at, but that one's using different processes, or will be in the next few years. With that one, they might actually be able to have enough power to create a portal and do things like that.
My next question would be, do they need to create a portal for the beings to travel from our realm to their realm?
No, I believe any time, and this gets more into the spiritual side and more away from the scientific side, but I believe any time we go against God's wishes, that can create a portal. There are occultists nowadays that just through meditation will create spiritual portals. Now, of course, the physicists and people at CERN, they're doing it for the most part outside of a belief of God. Most of them are atheists or agnostic, and they don't really care to think about what God might want. So they're using the technological side to access these portals. But any time, and the Bible talks about this too. That's why God lays out really clearly what He wants us to do and what He doesn't want us to do. It's not because He's a ruthless dictator or anything like that. It's just to make things easier on us. We'll be happier the more that we follow what He says we can and can't do. So anytime that they're going outside of that, which I believe that they are doing things at CERN that are definitely going outside of that, such as accessing higher dimensions and things. The Bible tells us that we shouldn't be messing around with that stuff. It's basically, in a way, it could be considered necromancy and things like that. But the more that we do that, I believe the more it stretches that veil between our world and theirs. The wherever the enemy is, and it stretches that veil, and the more that stretches, holes can start to break through, and they can come through. And I know that's something I've talked about on your show before. When in my past, when I was this was years ago, when I was into New Age and all astral travel and all that stuff, I didn't know it at the time, but every time I was practicing those things, I was disobeying God. I knew I knew that, but I didn't know that I was creating doorways every time I did that. I was creating portals until those things started coming through, and they started attacking me and my family. So yeah, they don't need to do what they're doing to create these portals, but since they're coming from a scientific point of reference, they're not looking at any, they're not looking at it spiritually at all. That's basically all they have to go on. But it is more dangerous, I believe, what they're doing, because with the spiritual portal, it's a spiritual problem, so it has a spiritual solution. You use the name of Jesus you close the thing, and then it's done. But with something like this, that's more tangible, it's more physical. I don't want to say more real, because I think on God's terrain, that's what's real. We're really just more of a shadow of that. But it's more physical. We can plead the blood of Jesus over it, and that might prevent some things from getting through, maybe. But it's kind of like your computer at home. You can pray over it all you want, but if somebody's going to hack into it, or if somebody's going to put a virus on your computer, that may or may not happen. It really just depends. So I don't believe that they have to do it, but I believe that is a means to do it more effectively in the long run, more on a global scale.
Interesting. That when listening to your answers about that, it reminded me, or the thought popped into my mind of trying to unleash not the dark angels or the fallen angels, but unleash hell on earth, literally, as we would read about in Revelation in the end time, that there would be some kind of spiritual tidal wave of darkness that is not just the power of the fallen angels, but those other entities that are evil, that are dead, that are under their control, because it doesn't make sense to me that a fallen angel, and especially an angel of the Lord, would need a human-made portal to come and go. And that's something that never sat right with me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I believe that there's a human component and a spiritual component, because when we read in the book of Revelation, it says that the angel was given the keys to the abyss. And we learn earlier in Revelation that it's actually Jesus who has the keys to death and hell. So, and that word keys in the Greek could actually mean like a type of authority. It could be read that Jesus is the one that gives this fallen angel permission to open the abyss. Now, why would God do something like that? You know, there are a lot of times in the Bible where God will use the enemy to fulfill his own needs, and it's usually in the way of judgment or things like that. The Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. Now Pharaoh had already made his choice. That doesn't mean that God took away his free will. Pharaoh had already made his choice, so it was it was kind of a done deal by then anyway. But since he had already made his choice, God hardened his heart even further to proclaim even more to the majesty of God and what a miracle he did for the children of Israel back in that time. So, and when you read through Revelation, like the four horsemen, those that are released on the earth, those are the enemy. But God is utilizing the enemy to fulfill judgments and things like that. And when we really look at what judgment means, I mean, we bring it on ourselves. God's not going to put us under judgment if we don't do anything wrong, So there's a human element too. I believe that there has to be some type of act against God to be able to bring these things through, and some of the things that they're doing at CERN might be that thing. And it's something that I speculate about in another blog about how if they do develop this technology to use gravitons in an attempt to communicate with higher dimensions, that really is, in my opinion, I think in most people's opinion, that really is necromancy. I mean, they're trying to communicate with things that they're not supposed to be communicating with. You could even, in a way, say that it's prayer to false gods, because really, what is prayer? It's just talking. It's communicating with something. So, like when I pray to God, I'm communicating with Him. It doesn't have to do with me, being kneeled down and have my hands folded. That's not. My eyes closed and all that, that's not what makes a prayer a prayer. The prayer is the communication itself. So if and when they create this binary graviton communication system and send a message out into higher dimensions to see if anything comes back, that in a sense it's like a modern day prayer. It's an attempt at a communication, and it's to false gods, because who else is gonna answer it? And I believe that we're given the answer in Revelation 9 that talks about these locust beings that come out of the abyss. So one thing that I talked about in that blog was, and I'm writing about in the book, is the possibility that what they're doing at CERN might be the human component to opening the abyss. And now, again, there's still the spiritual component, but I think that it really starts here and with disobeying God in such a way that something that extreme would happen. So I mean that's my opinion. I mean, it could be wrong, but that's kind of how I look at that aspect of it.
Very interesting. With what we have coming up, the Pope coming here in September, the end of the Tetrad, the Blood Moons, the Jade Helm operations, we have all these different convergence of events, the economy, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we can go on and on. A lot of people also are pointing to some kind of spiritual shift or change. And, we talk about frequencies in the past and how frequencies can be used as weapons, the sound weapons they have, how they can be used to make behavior changes in a person, anger, happiness, play with people's emotions. Some speculate that there are and have been frequencies from different places in the United States and the world that government have been experimenting with and or now have perfected in order to get people's emotional, the control of their emotions, or to trigger certain, mental behaviors. Do you see is there a danger here? Should we be worried about the ability of the governments to create frequencies that alter our minds and moods?
Yeah, well, first off, we should fear God and not man, but we should, definitely be concerned. I don't want to say that people should be afraid, because we're not given a spirit of fear.
Yeah, but I'm not afraid. Aware.
That's the perfect word for it. Yeah, absolutely aware. Because I do believe that they're doing these things, and even, there's just no really good language to get around it. Horrifyingly, one of the things that they might be able to do in the future, and I can get more into this a little later after if we get to talk about quantum field theory, but one of the things that they might be able to do is actually put another consciousness in a person. It would have to be an entity, I would imagine, but this wouldn't just be like a split personality. This would be an actual separate consciousness in you, and they might be able to actually just take your consciousness away, essentially killing you, and using your body as a vehicle for this other consciousness. And that's something that if I would have heard somebody say that like 2 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I would have thought that that's crazy. And I'm not one to make sensationalist claims without being able to back it up, but there's actual real science behind that that they are looking into now. Now they'll never present it that way, but one of the things that they're looking into is artificial intelligence, and that actually has something to do with CERN too. When I want to make sure I have enough time if I really start getting into this area. How much longer do we have before we go on break?
We got 12 minutes until the top of the hour, and then really, Josh, anything you want to talk about, we'll just let you loose, and you can do that, and we can ask questions later. So 12 minutes until break time, and then we'll go from there.
All right, fantastic. That sounds good. Well, I'll hold off on that until after the break then, because it gets there's a lot of background information that needs to be known for that to make sense, especially in quantum field theory. But yeah, the basic, the really main thing around all of this is we owe it to ourselves and our family and really the church as a whole to get out there and research these things, test everything, and don't let the world tell us that we're too stupid or too dumb to understand it, because that's just a flat out lie. I've had teenagers, 13, 14-year-olds read my books and write me and say that they understood it perfectly, they loved it, and they were able to understand every page. And I've even had 80-year-olds write me and say the exact same thing. Now that doesn't mean that I'm just such a good writer that it has nothing to do with that. It's that the information actually is attainable for everybody. God's not the author of confusion. So God's creation, as marvelous and full of splendor as it is, it's simple and easy to grasp. The problem is when the enemy gets involved, when Satan gets involved and starts influencing, scientists or the authorities in these fields to make it more complicated than it needs to be. And like I said earlier in the show, they basically have developed a new language that you have to learn to even understand what they're talking about. And it's unfortunate because it doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. The concepts are easy and simple, and again, He's just not the author of confusion. The author of confusion is Satan, the enemy. So when the world tells us that we can't grasp this stuff or we have to be a genius, it's just not true.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree with you. And we saw an article the other day on CNN talking about the TPP and the TPA, and it said, it was quoting some lawmaker who said, well, the fact that it's not public is not really relevant because if it were public, the American people couldn't comprehend it anyway. And they use
that's how they.
Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just saying, that's how they look at us. That's how the people in charge look at us. We're consumers. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, they use it as a tactic to make people feel as though they're not, worthy or smart enough to understand such complex matters. But you're right. You made a great point about the language, especially the English language. It has been so watered down, and it has been manipulated and changed. You have the common language, and then you have legal language. You have just such a widespread epidemic of illiteracy in this country now, when this used to be the most literate nation ever on the earth. We always talk about the example of a test from the 1890s, how a sixth grade English test couldn't be passed by college master, candidates nowadays. They've dumbed us down. They have distracted us and given us, small trinkets for carnal pleasure, meanwhile implementing their supernatural evil agenda. And they've been, batting 100% because they're right on track.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They're the ones that have dumbed us down, and yet they're the ones that are talking down to us because we're dumbed down. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's Satan all over. I mean, that's his personality. That's what he does. He did that to Eve in the garden. He's like, did God really say that you can't? That's been the tactic of the enemy ever since the beginning, to make us doubt ourselves, question ourselves, and when God does talk to us, to make us doubt that. We even see that really prevalent in the church. I mean, there are so many different doctrines and hundreds of denominations now, because it goes right back to Satan's doubting. Did God really say? So it has us coming up with all these different interpretations of different things, and no one really can get a grasp on what's real and what's not. And it's unfortunate, but that's the state of the world and of the church that we're living in. So, I mean, I'm saying my main thing is, let's get it together. Let's not let them do this to us. There's no rule saying that they get to do this to us and we can't defend ourselves. We owe it to ourselves to go out and learn this stuff on our own. And the internet has been a source of a lot of evil, but it can be a source for a lot of good too. We have the ability to educate ourselves. We're not going to get a master's degree or anything like that, but we can learn the same things that they know. We just won't have a piece of paper to prove it, but who cares? And in the spiritual scheme of things, who cares about posterity? So yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you. There's definitely something going on today that is an effort to dumb down the world, and they're succeeding. And it's so they can do, our governments and really even the spiritual side, the enemy, can do whatever they want without any backlash from us, because the enemy knows, Satan knows, his only his enemy, his only threat is us, the church. It's Jesus. If we don't exercise in that, if we don't implement that and defend ourselves, he has free reign over the world, and he can do whatever he wants. The government can do whatever they want. I say we need to educate ourselves and not let that happen.
You're right on point, Josh. Sorry for that delay. We were just receiving some emails on, was it an echo or?
We've got it. Yeah, it's echoing badly according to a handful of people, and
we turned it on here, and it sounded fine, but they're just getting reports.
And the lag is just incredible. So we apologize for that. I'm not sure what's up with that, but go ahead.
But yeah, you're coming in loud and clear, Josh, and. I don't know if you want to reconnect, we can reconnect. If you want during the break here to hang up off the call, and I'll add you to our Skype. That's how we connect with Stan every week, and it works fine. And if we have problems there, then we will call your house phone. And if we have problems there, then we'll come over.
well, put the coffee on, brother.
Yeah, our door's always open to you guys. But yeah, that sounds good. We can do that.
All right. Here's what we're going to do right now. Let's do this. Since we're at this point here, we're going to take our top of the hour break right now and reconfigure this. That way, there won't be any other issues, hopefully, for the rest of the program. This is fantastic. This is great information, Josh. And, folks, our very special guest, Mr. Josh Peck, a gentleman that we first met in Dublin, Ohio at the Prophecy Conference there last, I think, when was it, Josh? Last November? It was just several months ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, November 2014.
Okay, wow. And the information that you had provided was something, I knew, and Joe knew immediately. We both knew that it was so important that people understand this for so many reasons. And, what you said earlier, the scientists, the people in power, they have a tendency to make us think that we're stupid or we can't understand this, when in fact, we can and we must. And you've got a gift of your books. I was reading them, going through them today, Cherubim, Chariots, as well as Quantum Creation, the way you write them. And this isn't false flattery. This is just a matter of fact. You make it so people can understand the different dimensions and interdimensionality, and by watching the videos too, understanding really what quantum physics is. And so thank you so much for everything you do, folks. Josh's website is ministudyministry.com. And very simply, go to hagmanhagmann.com, and on the right-hand side there, underneath today's program, just click on the link on his name, and it'll take you directly to his website. Don't forget to support his ministry, and of course, he's got his radio and television appearances there, and in the front page, he's got his Skywatch TV interviews, fantastic interviews.
Yeah.
And I'd urge everyone to watch the top two there that he's got, and also take advantage of the featured products, especially the books, the two books. You can't beat the price, Cherubim, Chariots, and Quantum Creation. I think Josh might have charged me double for his books, just because I was a pain in the butt following him around, trying to pick his brain.
Bumper music by accident, not to cut you off there.
It's all right. No problem. Folks, we're right back. Stay with us.
Hagmann Report. Our guest tonight is Mr. Josh Peck. He is a speaker, author, some fantastic books. Quantum Creation is one book, and Cherubim Chariots is another. Josh, do you have any other books that you're working on or ready to release?
Oh yeah, I have I think 7 or 8 other books prior to those. Most of them are what I call mini study books, which is where the name Mini Study Ministry comes from. There's 5 of those. They're real short. They're only about 50 pages apiece, and I also have all of those in an anthology. I have that. I have my first book was Disclosure, which I believe we talked about on your show before. I have a gospel harmony I put together a couple of years ago. See, I have a lot of other little odds and ends out there. Currently, I'm working on the book that part of which I'm talking about in this episode, and then there will definitely be more to come on that because it's not finished yet. But I'm also putting together just a giant book on spiritual warfare, and it's actually called Spiritual Warfare in the 21st Century. What makes this book unique is my actual writing is only a small part of it. It's basically a collection of interviews from 14 different authors and researchers that were kind enough to devote their time to speaking with me about various aspects of spiritual warfare, because I think that's one of the questions that I get the most out of anything is concerning spiritual warfare. So I'm currently putting that together. It's about halfway done. I'm hoping it'll be out in a couple of months. It's probably going to be about 700 and 800 pages. It's going to be a big book, but it's a big topic, so it'll definitely be worth it. But yeah, that brings us up to date on all that stuff.
I apologize. I forgot about the book Disclosure. I have actually read that book, and I completely forgot about it. But where would you like to go this hour?
Yeah, we'd like to turn you loose, Josh, and because I know you had spent all week with talking points. So go ahead and just consider this your venue for presentation, and we're going to stay out of your way as much as possible.
Thank you so much, guy. I really do appreciate that. That means a lot. Coming on your show and being able to just have free rein to talk about whatever I want. That really means a lot. And I do want to say too, because I want to make sure there's a record of it on air, because I've said it before, but I want to make sure I've got to get you guys on my show sometime. I'd love to have both of you on the Sharpening sometime soon in the future. So we can talk about that more later. But I think really the basis of all this stuff, we ended the last segment with me saying how important it is for us to understand these things and be educated. So I'd like to, take up my role in that and step up to the plate and try my best to convey and educate your listeners as best as I can. It really starts with quantum field theory, and this was one of the most phenomenal things I've ever come across in all my studies and research. It's literally the basis for everything. It's the basis of creation. It's the methods that God has used to keep us all in existence. So I think that would probably be the best place to start. And actually, I'm going to bring up the part that I have written in my new book, so I can give your listeners the very first sneak peek and maybe a couple of quotes from my book. I haven't even done this on my own show yet, so that's good. But quantum field theory. Not a lot of physicists will really talk about it, and actually, really the only physicist that I know that has talked about it to the general public, people like you and I, is one named Sean Carroll. He wrote. I have two of his books. They're excellently written. One is called From Eternity to Here. That one's really about time and how time works. And then the other one is called The Particle at the End of the Universe, How the Hunt for the Higgs Boson Leads Us to the Edge of a New World. Now I'll preface, because I'll probably talk a little bit about Sean Carroll's work throughout this, because he's one of the only ones that talks about this, but I'll preface it by saying he's not a Christian. So some of the things that he says, if you read his stuff or watch his presentations, you have to take with a grain of salt. But it is a good lesson in something that I talked about on probably the first show that I was on with you guys. is the importance for the church to be able to separate observation from interpretation. And just a quick overview of what that is, there are observations made every day, and those observations can be absolute truth. Even in the scientific community, they can write out an equation that'll be absolutely true, or they can discover a particle or something that will be true, that particle exists. But a lot of times, and scientists, especially lately, have been really taking a lot of liberties with this. They'll put their own interpretations on it, and they'll say, well, this means that if there is a God, it's an impersonal God because this equation says so, or something. That's the scientist or physicist putting his own interpretation. So we need to know how to separate those two. Just because the observation is true, we don't have to accept the interpretation. The reason that I bring that up is one thing that Sean Carroll does say, and again, I'll say I really do like his work. He's brilliant. I've learned a lot from him. But one thing that he does say that I absolutely do not agree with is that quantum field theory proves there is no afterlife. And he's gone on record to say this numerous times, and it's not true. That's his interpretation of quantum field theory. Now, quantum field theory can still be absolutely true in the way that he understands it without that interpretation having to be true. And the reason that he says that, I'll get into it a little bit more depth, and it'll make more sense a little later. But basically, he feels that way because all the particles in what's known as the standard model, which is basically it's basically every particle that we would run into in our day-to-day lives, what people are made of, or what matter on Earth is made of. It doesn't really count stranger things like dark matter or anything like that, but it's the stuff that's here. When the Higgs boson was discovered, that was like the last piece of the puzzle of the standard model. So since all of those particles have been discovered, and their associated fields, which we'll get into in a minute, he believes that there's been no observed instance of information going anywhere, or when something passes on or when somebody passes on, there's no mechanism in place for that. And he believes that if there was, then they would have discovered it at the LHC already, and they haven't. So that's why he believes there's no afterlife. I reject that interpretation. I don't believe that at all. And actually, I think that there are things in quantum field theory that could, potentially prove that there is an afterlife. Now, of course, we as Christians don't. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
John, wouldn't that defeat the purpose of faith and belief, to be able to prove?
Yeah, in certain regards, but yeah. If they proved it was there was an afterlife, they wouldn't be able to prove which afterlife it was. So we would still need faith in God, because every religion has some form of afterlife. So I mean, if they ever did prove it, if they ever did prove some kind of quantum mechanism that carried a person's information or consciousness, carried it somewhere, they could just as easily say that it's the afterlife according to the Quran, or according to Indian mythology, or any of the hundreds of thousands of religions that are out there. So we would still, but that's also why I don't think that they're ever going to be able to really prove that. So we would still need faith. But the thing with quantum physics is nothing is ever really proven. I mean, even Einstein's the things that he was able to tell about, like general relativity, they're still technically theories. Because there are certain instances in quantum mechanics, or when you go down to that level, where those theories just break down and nothing works as it's supposed to. So yeah, going back to quantum field theory, basically what that is, like I said before, it's the absolute foundation of anything, any kind of quantum physics, and it really tells what everything actually is. So basically, we went over what quantum means. It's the smallest of the small. fields are basically, if you think about every point in space having a value of some sort, that would be a field. One example could be, this is just a thought exercise. This isn't an actual field, but you could think of the temperature in the air as a field. Every point in space, every point in the room, in front of you, would have a value attached that would tell you the temperature. So, the temperature would be higher near the ceiling, and colder. The temperature values would be lower near the floor. Because hot air rises. But that's not exactly a field, because that's just the quality of the air. But it's a good thought exercise to try to envision what a field actually is. Now, a quantum field is, we could think, actually, the magnetic field is a good example. I'm sure we probably all have done in high school, we've all done the experiment where you put two opposing magnets together with iron filings, and then you can see the ripples and the waves that the filings make. Well, those ripples and waves, that's the magnetic field. So points in space closer to the opposing magnets will be stronger in force, so the values would be higher. And then further away from the magnetic field, they would be lower. It's the same with the gravitational field of the Earth or any planetary body. The closer you are to the Earth when you're on the ground, the gravity is going to be stronger. The gravitational field is going to be stronger. The further you are away from it, like say closer to the moon or something, the gravitational field of the Earth is going to be weaker. So it's really just it's every point in space with a value. Now the thing about fields is every elementary particle has a field associated to it, and every field has a particle associated. You can't have one without the other. And when I say elementary particle, that just means you can't break it down anymore. It's not made of anything. And once again, I promise that will make sense. So every field has a particle. That's how they know, even though they haven't directly observed gravitons, they know that they exist because of that rule of quantum field theory. We know that there's a gravitational field, so there has to be a particle associated with it, and they have named that particle the graviton. So, let me see where I'm at here. All right, so that brings us to what they are doing at CERN and how the Higgs boson was actually discovered, because that's a big question. We hear a lot about, especially right after the discovery, we heard a lot about the Higgs boson itself, but almost nothing of the Higgs field. And really, the Higgs boson isn't the thing that's important, it's the Higgs field. The Higgs boson was just the particle that proved that the field is there. And what the field does is when a particle interacts with the Higgs field, that's what mass is. That's what determines its mass. So when a particle interacts more strongly with the Higgs field, it has more mass. And if it doesn't interact as much, it has less mass. If it doesn't interact at all, then it has no mass, like a photon. Now, how can something that exists have no mass whatsoever? Now, here's where this makes sense. I'm sure you guys have probably heard the question, light, is it a particle or is it a wave? That's a big question that's posed to high school students and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And, I never really remember being given an answer to that, and I thought it was because nobody knew. But the reality is there is an answer. It's a wave. That everything is waves. How that works is when we say that in quantum field theory a particle is associated with a wave, really what that, associated with a field, really what that particle is a fluctuation in the field. So when the values of the field go up high enough in a certain localized area, that's what a particle actually is. it is that fluctuation. The fluctuation doesn't create a particle. The fluctuation is the particle. What we observe isn't really what exists. So, quantum mechanics says that when we look at a wave or a fluctuation in a quantum field, we see a particle because of our limited perception. It resolves into a particle. But that particle really is a wave. So a photon, we can see the particle itself, but really by nature, what it is it's a wave or a fluctuation in the electromagnetic field. That's what a photon is. So there are two different kinds. There's matter particles and force particles, basically. And the main real difference between those is that with force particles, you can have more than one in one point in space. Matter particles, you can't. That's why matter is solid. It connects together. But by nature, even matter itself is really just energy. It's just waves in other fields. You have atoms, which are made of an electron, which is an elementary particle, and which again is just a wave in the electric field. And you have the atomic nucleus, which is made of protons and neutrons. Proton is made of two up quarks and a down quark, and then a neutron is two down quarks and an up quark. And they have gluons that hold the quarks together. Now, the quarks and the gluons, those are the elementary particles. Those are the fluctuations in the field. Now, when those fluctuations get together, they create the nucleus of the atom. So you have these waves kind of coming together and attaching them, their energy to one another. And then the electron is there too. That's what creates an atom. It's really just, in a sense, it's really just a different kind of energy. So when we have a solid object, it's really condensed energy. That's what E equals mc square actually is. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So we have the speed of light, and you square that. You times it by itself. And then when you multiply that by the mass of an object, the answer comes out to be how much potential energy that object has, or how much energy that mass actually has, which is a large number because we're timesing it by the speed of light squared. So it works out to where if there was a way to release it, you could take out a city block with just an apple. That's how much energy is packed into it, and that's why things are solid when why matter is solid. So that's really the heart of quantum field theory. Now, what that has to do with CERN and what they're doing there, and again, it goes back to that question: how do you get something like a Higgs boson out of smashing two protons together? We might first be inclined to think that the Higgs boson is hiding somewhere in the protons or something like that, but really it's not. It's an entirely different particle that comes into existence from this collision, and it's because of quantum field theory. You have two protons, and when they smash together, they release energy into these other fields. There are dozens and dozens of fields in every point in space. I think at last count there were 57, but it might be 58 now because of since then the Higgs field has been discovered. And so let's just say, for sake of argument, there's 58 fields that exist in every point in space around us. So when two protons are smashed together, all that energy has to go somewhere. It goes into these other fields and creates fluctuations in these other fields. Those fluctuations, again, that's the particle. So that's how you can smash two particles together and end up with a completely different particle. And there's no way to really direct that. They can't force the energy into one field or another. There's no way to do that. So it's kind of random. Most of the time when particles are smashed together like that, what comes out of it is a particle that we already know, that they already know about. It's usually like photons or quarks or something that's already been discovered.
Josh,
Josh,
can I just ask
sure.
you a question here? At the
Absolutely.
Really at the risk of showing my glaring ignorance on this, when you said 57 fields, around us, I'm trying to wrap my brain around that. I don't have enough duct tape here in my office to keep my head together on this. What do you mean by fields? 57 fields around us. Can you give me a word picture? Can you write it out in crayon for me or something? I'm trying to. Okay.
No, it's completely understandable. I mean, it's a difficult concept because it's so different than what we've been taught. We're usually taught particle physics, but we're not taught what particles actually are. And that's the fault of, the schools and scientists that try to explain these things. So basically, when I say that there are, 57 fields, like in front of us, it's really more of like a potential kind of thing. As far as like a word picture, well, let's say you're immersed in water. You're actually immersed in hydrogen and oxygen. That you could think of that as like two fields, sort of. But the difference there is you're immersed in it and it actually exists. That would be like if every particle was, in every point in space. But in quantum field theory, the fields are really more about the potential for a particle to exist. So just because there are 57, fields in front of me doesn't necessarily mean there are going to be 57 different particles in front of me. I mean, that would be impossible. But there's the potential for them. There's a mechanism there that exists where if you add energy, a particle can spring out of that. And that's basically what existence is. That's why, physicists will say that, and they say it in the most confusing way, I swear, but, they'll say empty space really isn't empty. And that kind of logic makes no sense, and it's because it's the way that they word it. What they should say is there's just no such thing as empty space. That would be a lot easier than to say empty space isn't empty. But yeah, it's basically like a potential, factor. If enough energy is rattled off, and again, there's no way to really direct the energy, so it could go into any of the fields that are there. Then a particle can fluctuate the field, meaning just the values at that point go higher due to energy, and a particle, that's what the particle actually is. I don't know if that. I don't know if that.
Well, I think if I can picture this, as we walk through, a room full of air, basically, instead of saying that there's nothing in front of us or around us, what you're saying is we are walking through the kind of a soupy mass. Well, I shouldn't say mass, but a soupy environment that we really can't see, feel, or sense, but it's there, and it's comprised of 57 different potential fields, or, like mini waves. If you were in a swimming pool, like mini waves, if you will, as you walk through a head deep, or water over your head, like as you walk through that water, you can feel it. In this case, you can't, but, boy, I just confused myself there, I think. But.
No, that's perfectly fine. I mean, and that is a good way to think about it. And actually, I have it took me a minute to find it, but I have an excerpt from my book that talks about this, maybe in a way that'll be easier to understand. I probably should have started with that because this to me makes sense because it uses music as the way to explain this. And I'm a musician, so if you want, I could read this excerpt, and that might help. I think that'll help your listeners be able to put this together more.
Boy, it helped me too. So go ahead, buddy.
All right, so this is the first time that I have. Yeah, absolutely. This is the first time that I've read anything from my new book on the air too. So I was saving it for you guys. But all right. So this is from what chapter? Chapter 3, 4, I think. Okay. At every point in space, there are dozens of fields, 57 distinct quantum fields to be exact, according to the standard model, with the potential of fluctuating. When a fluctuation large enough happens, that fluctuation is the elementary particle. This means a fluctuation in the gravitational field is, in reality, a graviton. The fluctuation of the electromagnetic field is a photon. A fluctuation of the up quark field is an up quark. This also means a fluctuation of the Higgs field is a Higgs boson. We can use the example of a musical orchestra to help explain this. When music is played through the instruments, it comes out in the form of sound waves. These sound waves can compare to fluctuations in quantum fields. When you listen to the music, you don't exactly hear the entire wave. You hear the notes that are played. In a sense, the waves resolve into musical notes that our brains can process, just as quantum fluctuations resolve into elementary particles. We can think of each quantum field as a different instrument, each producing different notes. Some instruments, such as pianos and violins, can play chords, or two or more notes at the same time. This is comparable to boson fields, since bosons take up the same space. Boson field is an energy field. Other instruments, such as trumpets, can only play one note at a time. This compares to fermions, which that's matter, since you can only have one fermion in one place at one time. And a fermion is it's a matter particle. So during the concert, notes from certain instruments can come together with notes from other instruments to produce more interesting and complex sounds. In a sense, this is how more complex particles come together. Up quarks, down quarks, gluons, electrons, and W or Z bosons can come together to form the particles that make up an atom. In this way, the entire universe, from the beginning of time to the end, can be thought of as a magnificent cosmic symphony. So that's the excerpt. But basically, if you're at a concert, you could think of the air around you as having the potential for sound. If there are, say, 20 instruments in the concert, before the instruments start to play, the air would have the potential to carry 20 different sounds or different instruments. Quantum fields are kind of like that. We have and then in the orchestra analogy, when they start to play, then the waves actually come and resolve into notes and things like that. Quantum fields are kind of like that. They have the even if a particle isn't there at that time, they have the potential to create a particle really anywhere, as long as enough energy is put into it. Now, due to quantum mechanics, there's always a little bit of fluctuation in every field. They don't, it's so small that they don't resolve into particles, but there's always a little bit of fluctuation. So using that, and it's just like before a concert, people are talking and laughing and things like that. That's kind of like the little fluctuations before the big show. So then when the symphony starts, all those instruments come together, and that's what, for us, we could look at what would create really existence, complex things, the table in front of me, or the light bulb and the light that comes out of it that's lighting the room, things like that. So does that help kind of help put it in more relatable terms?
Yeah, it does, and it also.
Oh, good. That was the first time that I tested.
I just want to say it also speaks to me that there's a communicate. Well, I won't go there except to say that I would extrapolate from that that our existence and our communication with God, our existence, we exist based on the communication from God.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I have no problem. I'll go there for you. You're absolutely right, because nobody knows really what first caused those fluctuations or what put the fields there in the first place. I believe that fields are a way to is God's mechanism to translate His voice into reality. We learn from Hebrews, I believe it's 11:8, that God speaks everything into existence. I believe the fields are the mechanism that God uses, has created to translate His eternal voice into physical reality. So yeah, you're absolutely right, and I just might steal that line from you and put it in my book, because I couldn't have said that better myself. That is God's direct we are His communication to us. I mean, that's absolutely beautiful, Doug. I love that analogy, but actually, it's not even an analogy. It's not even an analogy. That reality. So yeah, I mean, you got it, brother. That's absolutely right, and that's what's so exciting about things like quantum field theory. Like, 'cause when we can understand God's creation to that level, it really is. The only reason that it's difficult, and believe me, quantum field theory, you got a hold of that way faster than I did when I first looked at it. It took me a while to really get it. But the main reason for that is because the way that we've been taught in science class and stuff to think of the world as particles. But then they tell us strange things like, well, a photon isn't made of anything. How could that be possible? But now, if we understand that particles are just fluctuations in fields and it's really just energy, well, then that makes perfect sense how it could be essentially massless, not have a mass, and it's just a fluctuation in a field brought on by energy in that field. That's how a particle can be made of nothing. But they never really teach you that in class, in science class. I have a quote here, if I can find it. Here we go. This is Sean Carroll, and I like this quote because it really does speak to how the science community tries to present ideas to the rest of the general public. He said this while he was giving a presentation about the discovery of the Higgs boson. He said, there are particles in the world? No, there aren't. That's the secret that we physicists have never told you, but here I am. I'm going to tell you right now. The reason why you're allowed to think of particles is because of quantum mechanics. The world is made of fields, but quantum mechanics says when you look at the world, you don't see it directly. What really exists, according to quantum mechanics, is immensely richer than the things we can actually observe. If I didn't know better, I would say a Christian said that. So, I mean, even physicists can, when they observe these things and try to get their heads around these things, they understand there is a majesty there. There's a beauty there. Unfortunately, they generally just don't do a good job of explaining that to the general public. Because when they announced the Higgs boson discovery in 2012, I watched everything I could about that, and I never heard anything about quantum field theory. We were left with the idea that the Higgs boson is what determines mass, and that's just wrong. And I believe that there's something deeper going on there. It's another attempt to give us disinformation or to make us ignorant of the truth. And it's in a small way, but it's still an inaccuracy. The Higgs boson doesn't determine mass. The Higgs field is what does that. Interaction, how particles interact with the Higgs field is what determines mass in particles. It really has nothing to do with the Higgs boson. I mean, the Higgs boson interacts with the Higgs field, and the Higgs field gives it mass. So that shows you. But the main importance with the Higgs boson was that it was proof that the field is there. And I really wish that the physics community could have gotten it together more to be able to communicate that to the general public a little bit better. But a lot of it too is because we've been brought up with the idea that it's all about particles and everything's made of particles. I mean, to really accept quantum field theory, we got to basically throw out and redefine everything that we've been taught about particle physics and really science in general. But Sean Carroll's absolutely right. I mean, what really exists is immensely richer to the things we can actually observe, and that's because it's God's. It has nothing to do with that's just how it is naturally. It's because it's God's. So what makes that important is when they're doing their experiments in the Large Hadron Collider and smashing these particles together, they don't know what's going to come out of it because and physicists will even admit there are particles that they're not aware of. They weren't aware of the Higgs boson until they discovered it. So that energy can really go into any of the and that's when I say 57 fields, that's just the known fields. There could be more. There could be thousands more that we don't know about. So when they're sending energy to these fields, they really don't know what kind of particles they're creating. They're kind of going under the assumption that what we observe, what we have already detected, or what we can look out in the cosmos. If we see dark matter or something. Well, you can't see dark matter, but if we perceive that it's there, those are really the only particles that can come about. But there's no real basis for believing that. There may only be 57 or 58, or there may be hundreds of thousands. There's really no way to tell. So they're sending that energy in these other fields that could resolve into God knows what kind of particles. Now, where that could get dangerous, as if that wasn't dangerous enough, just doing that, is well, let's see, where do I want to go with this? I guess we'll get into the quantum consciousness stuff. I think about another 17 minutes? Is another break?
Yeah, and we know.
Okay.
I mean, 17, 20. I mean, no. Don't worry if you go over.
All right, good deal. Well, that should be enough time to flesh this out. So one of the things, and even Sean Carroll will admit this, and he says, he'll say that everything that we deal with in our day-to-day lives we've already discovered. I'm not as confident about that, but he'll say that. But the one thing that he will admit that really physics has no idea how to think of it is consciousness. So let me see here. Yeah, the actual state of being self-aware. It's something that physicists, they've not come to an agreement or really even a good working theory on what consciousness is. There are a few ideas that it might be an interaction in a field, kind of like how interaction in the Higgs field, will bring that's what determines mass. There's an idea that possibly a certain interaction with a certain field is what produces consciousness. And that of course goes, it really toes the line of is science trying to define spirituality for us, or is spirituality trying to define science, or what? And I thought a lot about this. If it turns out that that's what consciousness is, it doesn't really bother me. Because that still doesn't quantify the soul or the spirit. It just doesn't. But when they talk about consciousness, I believe that they are only talking about physical consciousness, our day-to-day lives. I believe, according to the Bible, that like the full consciousness, or I think that our consciousness here is limited. The full consciousness is really nothing that we're going to experience until either after we pass on, or the rapture, or until we're on the other side. I think there's a big chunk of our consciousness that is already in heaven. We can talk about that a little later, but so when they're looking at these things, they're not thinking of it in terms of spirituality at all. So they see consciousness as just experience in a three-dimensional world. So even though they don't have like a really they haven't come to a consensus, that's not to say that there aren't theories out there, and there are plenty. There have been theories presented that say that consciousness is part of the electromagnetic field, and that's called SEMI theory, or CEMI theory. Now, physicists have largely dismissed the idea of the electromagnetic field producing consciousness or really having anything to do with it, because we have things like MRIs, and we're all around the electromagnetic field all the time, and it doesn't really seem to affect anything in those regards. But there is another theory that might actually have a better answer. It's called it's quantum brain dynamics, or QBC, or QBD, excuse me. It's a theory that states that there is a new quantum field that is responsible for consciousness, and this hypothetical field is known as the cortical field, and the quanta, or the elementary particle that is associated with that field, they're known as corticons. This is what Wikipedia says about it. This cortical field is postulated to interact with quantum coherent waves generated by the biomolecules in neurons, which is suggested to propagate along the neuronal network. I'm not going to read that whole paragraph, but the reason that I wanted it, even just that one sentence, is to show how they speak in another language. This is Wikipedia, and it's already like this. I can't understand that sentence. But basically and there's a whole page on that, but basically what it breaks down to is it's just the idea that that's what consciousness is. It's a particle, it's an interaction in a field called the cortical field, and the particle that's associated are called corticons. Now, if that turns out to be true, that would mean our personal consciousness exists by means of interaction with the quantum field, just like our mass does, or due to interaction by quantum particles. Now, because of quantum field theory, if the right amount of energy is applied to the cortical field, it could produce corticons, if this theory is true. So conceivably, that could be done at particle accelerators like the LHC and CERN. Now, there are scientists today that are trying to tackle this mystery of consciousness, and given that really could be tested with our current technology, it causes one to wonder what the future might look like if any of those quantum consciousness theories turns out to be true. If corticons are discovered, that would be proof of the cortical field, and that's how they would discover the cortical field, is by detecting a corticon. Just like the discovery of the Higgs boson was proof of the Higgs field. So, of course, there are enormous technological implications to a discovery such as that. The solution to how to make artificial intelligence a reality would be realized, and it would be cost efficient. You wouldn't need to hire a ton of programmers to try to write all this code and try to figure out how to make intelligence possible. Once they know how to produce a corticon, that's all they would have to do, and put that in a computer or something like that, and then just have that interact with the cortical field. Economically, that would be the way to go. And it would be limitless of resources. If there is a cortical field, you could make an infinite number of corticons. There would be no limit to it. All one would need to know is how to manipulate the cortical field and or corticons themselves to keep them active inside of a computer or another technological device. So, how much easier would that be to create real consciousness out of thin air by manipulating nature rather than spending an unimaginable amount of money in research and development on computer codes and software that can handle artificial intelligence? If corticons are found, it would be easier, more cost effective to apply corticons to a machine. Now, there's also great potential within the transhumanist crowd if corticons are discovered. They talk about the year 2045, the singularity, and how we'll be able to upload our consciousness into a computer. Well, if they discover corticons or the cortical field, they'd be able to do that a lot sooner than 2045. If they're able to quantify what consciousness is, they'd be able to transfer that out of the human body and into a machine or into a mainframe or something like that. Now, whether the soul and spirit are going to follow, I have no idea. If they create corticons and create an intelligence inside of a machine, is that going to be a new consciousness, or is it going to be the consciousness of some demon or some fallen angel somewhere? We don't know, but those are the types of things that they're looking for. And like I said, the most frightening thing about all that is really just how cost effective that would be, because that's what it always comes down to is the bottom dollar, like how much is something going to cost. And they're already running the LHC at higher power and everything, so that there's no extra cost to try to find corticons or to see if the cortical field is real. They already are doing experiments that have the potential for that. And if it does exist, the outcome for them is way more beneficial than it would be to try to do this stuff the hard way by writing all this code and hiring all these people. So I believe that I think that they are going to be looking into that if they're not already. They may have even discovered it already for all we know. I mean, I'm sure we're not told everything. But if not, and if that is true, and again, that's a big if because I don't know. Nobody does. But if that is true, that has huge prophetic implications surrounding it, because like what we talked about before, if they were able to discover that, they could change how you interact in the cortical field. They could change who you are. I mean, effectively, it would kill your consciousness. It would probably kill you, and they could replace your consciousness with another consciousness that they either create in a lab or from somebody else. So those are things that they would be able to do. Talk about how easy it would be to create a one-world government if they develop something like that. So that's one of many potential outcomes that could come out of things that they're doing at CERN. So, as we talked about before, there's definitely a reason for us to be aware of these things. But, again, as we talked about, we don't need to fear them because we're not given a spirit of fear. We're to fear God, not man. God can protect us from all that. And if something is implemented on us in that way, even if we die, we're still okay because God has us, and He's never going to let us go.
Understood. Joe?
Amen to that. Well, you said a whole lot there, Josh, and
yeah.
But I followed that very carefully. Josh, consciousness is what you're saying, if I'm hearing this correctly, and I've maintained this because I was told this, consciousness resides outside of our body, almost like cloud computing, for example. Now, tell me if this is correct. I mean, our consciousness does not reside within our physical being, but outside of our body, in like we'll just say like a cloud, much like cloud computing would be. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's a very fair statement, especially with the book of Ephesians, which we can get into after the break, because that's one of the most mind-blowing things and one of the biggest hopes that we have. So talking about all this scary stuff, it'd be good for us to get into that. But yeah, it does seem like that what we experience, what we see out of our eyes and hear with our ears, and how we interpret things, it's really only a piece of what we are. So it would be accurate to say that our consciousness or who we are. At least a big chunk of that is outside of our body, which biblically, taking that from the Bible, that'll take some explaining, but I'll be happy to do that after the break. But yeah, it would be accurate to say that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Very interesting. Yeah, folks, we're talking with author and speaker Josh Peck. His books are Quantum Creation, Cherubim, Chariots, the book Disclosure. All three of these books I have read, and I absolutely enjoy them. They fill in the blanks of questions that I had in my mind, and they gave answers to questions I never even
you didn't even know you had, right?
Exactly. And it provides a great biblical basis for an argument against these ancient alien astronaut, whatever they are, as we have been inundated by a propaganda plan to convince us that there are entities out there that are from another world, and they are possibly oppressive, or they're here to help, which is a setup for a invasion of fallen angels, as it was in the days of Noah, and to have the population not only have their guard down, but openly and willingly accept the terms of the fallen ones presenting themselves as saviors, and therefore, religion would instantly go out the window, as people out there, even people who are part of the church, would not see the need for the Lord anymore if their answer for a Savior came to them in this fleshly world. It is a scary possibility and a very real possibility. And when we have all the problems building up inside this country, inside this world, from the Middle Eastern chaos and the persecution of Christians to the destruction of the American way of life, we see the fall of the Western world, buildups of wars and rumors of wars, the natural disasters the Lord talked about. We have signs all over the place, from the blood moons to other celestial events that are happening. And the Lord says specifically, more than anything else, when warning about the end times, about deception, do not be deceived by people. Do not be deceived by false Christ. Make sure that you know exactly what you're dealing with. And to do that, you need to have the Lord in your life as the most integral part. And you also need to be aware of the enemy's devices. And you have to have a strong conviction and really be on fire for the Lord to have the discernment necessary to understand all the things that are unfolding before our eyes and where to go from there. We'll be right back after this short break with our guest, Josh Peck, for the third and final hour. It's been a great first 2 hours.
Awesome. Sounds good. I appreciate that. Yeah, it really all centers around CERN at this time, and there are a lot of other sciences that are doing things they shouldn't be doing, like in biology. There's certainly a lot going there with crossing other animals with other animals and animals with humans and all that sort of stuff. But my main interest of study, where I feel God has really led me to, is in the area of physics, and specifically quantum physics. I believe that the more that I look into this, that quantum physics is going to play a huge part in the prophetic future, and because again, it's the absolute foundation. It's the basis of the creation itself. And that's exactly what the enemy wants to subvert, is God's creation, including us. So it's important to have a good basis on these things. And a lot of what we've been talking about throughout the show are things to watch out for, and potential warnings, I guess. and there is at least one. I mean, there are a lot, but there is at least one more I want to address on this show. But there are also a couple of really good things that, you know, an understanding of quantum physics can actually help us understand further some of the promises of God. Now that doesn't have anything to do with faith. It's not going to add to our faith at all, but it can help us get our heads around some of these things, and I'll explain that. I'll explain that after this thing. But so I have at least one more thing to get into, which goes into something I already discussed briefly, I believe in the hour before last, and I'll go into it in more detail here. And then after that, if you guys have any questions about it, I'd be happy to answer them. And then I have there are two things specifically that, you know, I one of them I wasn't even really it wasn't on my list. I wasn't really planning on getting into, but during the course of that last break, I feel led to talk about it, so I will. And it's, you know, good uplifting things, but I think that'd be a good thing to end on. But well, the other main warning, and again, there are so many that we could talk about. Even if we just focused on CERN and only CERN, there are so many potential things that could come out of that. One thing that, you know, we talked about briefly was this possible graviton communication system. I want to explain a little bit more because I think that might be one of the main things that's going to possibly come up in our future. In our near future. Now, the graviton's probably the strangest theoretical particle that's ever been talked about or hypothesized, mainly because gravitons have the ability to transcend dimensions. They can float freely between our 3 dimensions of space and even higher dimensions of space. And that's just how they are by nature. That's how that they might be utilized. Now, when we talk about extra dimensions, you know, we mentioned that I think just about in probably every show I've done with you guys, we talked about what extra dimensions are. So I don't want to, you know, waste too much time in rehashing all of that over again, because I'll take up the entire show if I do that. But just a quick summary, I do believe that the term extra-dimensional and the term spiritual are really synonymous. Physicists talk about extra dimensions. I believe that they're talking about heavenly realms and not realizing it because, you know, they don't believe in that. They use a different terminology, but essentially they're talking about the same thing. So when they talk about things like dark matter and dark energy, I do want to touch on those at least just briefly. But dark matter, they're able to calculate the gravity out in the universe, like in other galaxies. And what they find is that there is more matter, there's more mass there based on the gravity than what we can see. So they don't know what accounts for that, and they just call it dark matter, for lack of better words, because they're in the dark about it. You know, they can't see it. And then dark energy is there's some type of force, some type of energy that is causing the expansion of the universe. Every celestial object is being pushed away from every other celestial object, and strangely enough, it's being pushed away faster and faster and faster, exponentially. It's not slowing down; it's speeding up, and they don't know what is causing that, so they call it dark energy. Now, the reason that dark matter especially is important, the leading theory right now is that dark matter is comprised of particles that we just haven't discovered yet. And that gets into things like supersymmetry and stuff like that. I think it's possible because gravity can transcend dimensions. I believe that it's possible that what we see here, you know, in our 3 dimensions of space is really just a slice a three-dimensional slice of a larger extra-dimensional creation. And the Bible even talks about that. There's the New Jerusalem, the Jerusalem above and the Jerusalem below. And so I believe that there is extra-dimensional structure in creation. But since gravity can transcend dimensions, that extra-dimensional creation could easily affect gravity here in our dimensions of space. So when they don't know where that extra gravity is going, and they have nothing else to call it but dark matter, I believe that is actually extra-dimensional matter or heavenly creation that we're seeing evidence of. And that's important because if true, and it's just a theory, but if true, it does show how real that stuff is. A lot of times in our culture we're inundated with this idea that spiritual existence is kind of ethereal and wispy and not really real. But it's actually the opposite. What we are, physical reality, is the wispy, ethereal reality. We're the shadow, in a sense, of something larger. So gravity might be showing that, and that might explain why gravity is so much weaker than the other forces. But anyway, well, the reason that's important, that gravitons can go into higher dimensions, let's say. Something else that I've talked about on your show and I wrote about in my book, Quantum Creation and Cherubim Chariots, is I believe that when during the rebellion of the enemy, Satan and his fallen angels, when they were first kicked out of heaven, I believe, and again, this is just my own interpretation, so it could be wrong, but I believe that they were kicked down to the fourth spatial dimension. And I know I talked about that a lot on previous episodes with you guys. So I won't go into all the reasons for that because it'll take too much time. But I do believe that in Revelation, when it says that Satan is banished to earth, basically, I think that's when the enemy, Satan and the fallen angels and everything that's out there, is kicked down to our dimension, and they're basically stuck here with us, and they don't have access to the higher dimensions anymore. One of the times that we see something like that is the opening of the abyss. Now, we did talk about how the communication system would work, in a sense. If they discover how to utilize gravitons, they could just change the spin or something of a graviton and create a type of binary code that they could send into higher dimensions, and then they would just need a detector to see if anything sends anything back. That's the theory, the idea that was presented in that documentary. And if people are interested in watching that documentary, I have a link in my blog. Just you can go to my website, just Josh Peck's blog, and it's scientific communication with extra, or what do I have? What's the title of this? Scientific communication with extra-dimensional beings is gravity, the key to the bottomless pit. So people can get the link there. But when we read Revelation 9:1-3, that's when we get the actual the basis of this. The fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power. So here's an instant where the bottomless pit is open, and these demonic fallen angel things come out. And I believe they're actually fallen cherubim. The reason I believe that is if we compare this with the book of Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel gives and this is part of why I believe quantum physics is going to have something to do with Bible prophecy, is Ezekiel describes something that today is called extra-dimensional unfolding. And that's basically, that explains why the angels are melded together in that way. When something from a higher dimension is unfolded at least twice, those lower dimensional unfoldings, they start to take up the same space. And I know we talked about that before too, and I also wrote about it in Cherubim Chariots. And I believe I touched on it in quantum creation too. But anyway, so basically the point is there's no way, Ezekiel wasn't a quantum physicist. There's no way that he would have known to explain things in that way unless he actually saw it in that way. And the only reason he saw it in that way was because God let him see it in that way for a reason. When you read the rest of the book of Ezekiel, it's all prophecy, basically. It's pretty much all prophecy. So I believe that we're given a clue there. The way that we can understand what Ezekiel saw and why he saw it that way, why these angels were melded together when later on in Revelation, when John sees them in heaven, they're separated. They're not melded in this weird amalgamation thing, is because of quantum physics. It's higher dimensions being unfolded or translated into our dimension. Ezekiel was on Earth when he saw those things, and that's why he saw them that way. When John was translated or taken up to heaven, or however you want to look at it, he was seeing them in their natural habitat. Now, I believe that these locust things from Revelation are, well, for one thing, I don't believe that they're called locusts because they look like locusts. I believe that is it's analogous to their job because they come to destroy and everything. When we actually look at the descriptions of these things, they really are the complete antithesis of the good angels, the heavenly angels, the heavenly cherubim that Ezekiel saw. And there are a lot of things we could look at in those regards, but basically in the book of Ezekiel, he describes these angels as, for one thing, being melded together, so they're coming from a higher dimension, but they have humanoid type bodies, but the heads of animals. In Revelation, it's the complete opposite. They have the bodies of different amalgamated animals, scorpions and horses and things like that, but they have a human head, and those types of things were actually recorded in ancient times in the surrounding areas of Israel. They were called things like Lam Esu and Shadu, which is basically this type of guardian thing that looked like it was a bull's body or the body of a lion with a human head, and it's the complete antithesis of what Ezekiel saw, the good guys. So these other nations were using the bad guys, and calling upon them for protection and things. So there's another thing that shows that these are antithetical. Let me find it here. In Revelation, let's see. In Ezekiel, the good, the heavenly angels, one of them has, it describes it in a weird kind of way, so you got to really look into it to get this from it, but I lay it all out in Cherubim Chariots. The face is of one of these angels is half man, half lion, bisected vertically. And if you look really closely at the text, and even later on in Ezekiel, I think chapter 40, it talks more about that too. In Revelation, it says, let me find it here. 9, this is verses 7 and 8. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their head were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their face were as faces of men, and they had hair of women, and their teeth was as the teeth of lions. So two main things to point out there. They had faces of men, but teeth of lions. So if they had men's faces, but the teeth of lions, that would suggest also a half human, half lion face, but this time it's bisected horizontally rather than vertically, like in Ezekiel. So again, it's another clue that shows that these are the antithesis of the heavenly cherubim. These are the fallen cherubim. And then also, now we read in Ezekiel that these angels, the good angels, are holding up the throne of God. In Revelation 9:11, it says, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. That word over comes from the Greek word epi, which can mean upon, as well as a statement of authority. So there are times in the Bible when the word epi is used to describe something physically on top of something else without regard to authoritative position, such as when Jesus was taken to the top of by Satan, he was taken to the top of the temple. That word epi was used, and it just meant that Jesus was physically on top of the temple. So I don't believe that this only means that when it says they had a king over them, it doesn't only mean that the king is in authoritative position. The word king already tells us that. When it says over them, I believe that these fallen cherubim are actually carrying the throne of this Apollyon character, this evil being, as another point to that's the complete antithesis of what Ezekiel saw. Everything Satan has, everything God has, Satan has an inferior and evil duplicate. Satan doesn't have an original thought of his own, so he has to steal from God. So I believe it's possible that let me find where my notes are here. I believe that it's actually possible that if and when physicists or scientists or whoever does it, if they develop this graviton communication system, if they send it out, I think these are the things that they're going to be talking to, because like I said before, it's comparable in a way to necromancy. I don't believe God's going to honor it. I don't think it's going to be God communicating anything back to him at all, or any kind of heavenly angel. If they're going to get anything back, I believe it's going to be from these things. If not these locust things, then their king Apollyon. That's who they're going to be in communication with, and that might be the rebellion against God that it's going to take to open to for Jesus to give permission to that fallen angel. And again, what better sign for a fallen angel is there than a graviton? The particle responsible for things falling in the first place. But I believe that it's possible. It could be that that's the act of rebellion that it takes for Jesus to give permission to that fallen star and it gives them the keys, the permission to open the abyss, and that's when these things come out. So it's a possibility. It's something that that's what it could lead to. I don't know for sure if it will, but it's something that we should keep our eyes on. So that's basically that.
I mean, we're there. Basically, we're there right now, technologically speaking. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. They. When you say they, are you talking about the physicists or the actual the
technology? I mean, we.
Oh yeah. They wouldn't need to. Oh, sorry. We wouldn't need to, this is in the realm of possibilities today. All they would need to do is be able to detect a graviton. Because if they can detect one, they'll know how to produce one. And I mean, they're producing them all the time, but it's random. They don't have any real control over what graviton spits out of what particle. But once they detect one, or once they're able to observe it in some way, they could potentially create a string of these things to create a binary code. It really wouldn't take much more, if any, technological advance than what we have today. I mean, it's possible today. So, that's
wow.
Kind of a scary thought, but yeah.
Okay. Wow. Go ahead and continue. I just want to keep out of your way. Go ahead.
Sure. Oh, yeah. So that, we talked a lot about things that we should look out for, and that's good. We need to do that. We need to have conversations about that. The church as a whole, really needs to get on the ball with this stuff. But we also have to, keep in mind it's important to have things to look forward to also talk about things that are good and uplifting, and we don't want to rely totally on just that, because then we give no regard to prophecy, and then we start denying that the enemy even exists, and then we may as well join up with prosperity preaching or something. So we can't. But there's a good, we should have a good balance. And like I said, I didn't even really have this in mind to talk about on the show, but during the last break, I was just kind of thinking about where to take this last hour, since you guys so graciously gave me the time to do so. And again, I really do appreciate that. And I just felt a pull in my spirit that goes towards one of these blogs that I wrote a while ago, and something that God kind of showed me that seems to, it helped me. So I'm sure that there are other people out there that this will be good. And so I'll talk about this, and then there's one other just mind-blowing thing that still amazes me today, and that I think that would be a really good thing to end with. But so one of the weirdest things in quantum physics is this thing called wave-particle duality, and really that's on the side of quantum mechanics. But it's basically, when does a wave become a particle and a particle become a wave? It's basically like two things at one time, and that we already touched on that and talked about that. One thing that I talk a lot about in quantum creation is how God seems to imprint aspects of his personality or his nature in his own creation. It's kind of like how an artist will sign his own painting. There are a lot of God signatures out there. And one thing is I believe is wave particle duality. It's kind of like God and Jesus. It's one is they're both distinct yet they're the same. But also when we think about who God is, what God is, the promises that God has made, and how could they be possible? One of them has to do with the temple and our spirit and eternity, and really God's dwelling in us, because we read from the Bible that He's in us and we're in Him. So how is something like that possible? What do we mean when we say the Spirit of God dwells in us? I believe a lot of us probably have a basic understanding of that, and I believe that not a single one of us, given the limitations of our human perception, can really fully appreciate the full scope of what that really means. It really is a beautiful concept because it means we're never alone. It's one that's unique among all other theologies in the world. We can begin this with what Paul said to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 3:16. It says, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you?" There's two main ideas what that passage is referring to. The first says that it's meant to be understood as referencing the entire body of believers. The body of Christ as a whole is the temple, and the Spirit of God dwells in that body. And the second states that it's referring to the individual Christian. Each one of us acts as a temple of God, and He dwells in everyone individually. Personally, I believe both ideas are actually accurate. I believe God dwells in the church and in the individual Christian. One support for that view is the account of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. Acts 2:1-4 says, "And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place, and suddenly there came from heaven as a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Ghost, and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance." So we can find examples supporting both ideas in that passage. In verse 1 it says that they were all in one place and all with one accord. So the individuals were gathered together with one common mindset, and that shows how the group was made of individuals yet was acting as a single entity. Then in verse 3 it states that the cloven tongues appeared and sat upon each of them. So that demonstrates that they each had an individual experience. Verse 4, because of the singular language that's used there, it shows us that the source of this was one Spirit, the Spirit of God. So that passage can be used to show that the Holy Spirit dwells in each believer individually and as a whole. So the purpose of even bringing all this up, the main reason that I want to focus on the individual, I mainly want to focus on the individual aspect, because each and every one of us who has invited him to do so has the Spirit of God dwelling in us. We're even told exactly where he dwells in the first verse that we looked at. If we can view ourselves as the temple of God, we can compare that with the temple in the Old Testament. The temple was made of three parts: the outer court, inner court, and the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was the innermost part of the temple where God would dwell. And we, too, we're made of three parts: the body, soul, and spirit. So if we are God's temple, then our spirit would be comparable to the Holy of Holies. By contrast, our physical bodies would be comparable to the outer court. And Paul talked about that, the body and the spirit, in Romans 7:18 through 20. He said, "For I know that in me, that is, in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For to will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. Now if I do that I would not," or basically if the King James translation is a little funny here, but basically he's saying if I do what I shouldn't do, it's not me that's doing it, but the sin that dwelleth in me. That's Romans 7:20 that's saying that. Then later in Romans 8:9 through 11 it says, "But ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. If so be that the Spirit of God dwell in you. Now if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of his. And if Christ be in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. But if the Spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his Spirit that dwelleth in you." So this can all be used to show that the physical body is subject to sin, death, and decay, yet the Spirit of God dwelling in our spirits it triumphs over all that. And there's another interesting and encouraging thing we could look at in Hebrews 4:14 through 16. "For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need." Now that passage is telling us how God can understand our weaknesses and temptations, because he was, as it says, in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin. So I believe it's possible that goes further even than Jesus' earthly ministry. There's no doubt that Jesus during his ministry was tempted as we are and never sinned. The overall message here is that those temptations are not foreign to God. He experienced them himself, and given that, he understands what we're going through. And I think many times sorry, did you want to?
Well, in the scriptures, before he was...
Sorry, were you saying something?
Yeah, before he was taken to be crucified, he said the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And that speaks directly to what you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. And that goes further to support this point here. I believe God wanted... It's rare that when I do a radio show, I just go on and just answer questions or just talk about whatever. And rarely I get a feeling that there's something that I need to talk about or something that God wants out there. And I believe that there's somebody out there, one of your, or maybe a few of your viewers that are listening, that this here is going to be for. Because again, I didn't really plan on talking about this, but when God leads, you don't want to fight with him on it. But I believe that a lot of times, and I know I have been guilty of this, but many times we might find ourselves thinking that the idea that he was tempted in all ways, that basically anything we go through he went through. We might think that that's like an antiquated message without realizing it. There are temptations and hardships that we go through in our modern day in our modern age on a daily basis that we might be tempted to think God never had to deal with. For example, think about the many temptations that come from modern technology, which is a good point since we talked a lot about that today, that weren't available in the time Jesus walked the earth. We might even take that further and find ourselves believing that there are situations that we go through that bring about heartache, pain, and loss that Jesus might not have dealt with. Well, I propose that God truly does understand, not only because he dealt with the same basic temptations during his earthly ministry, but because he dwells in us. And I believe that means that he goes through all of our personal experiences with us. Jesus, God, and this will get into the next thing I'm going to talk about, but Jesus, God, he's outside of time. So when he says something, he can say something definitively and have it be true based on things that haven't happened yet. So I believe that because he dwells in us and, he goes through all of our personal experiences. And I believe that idea goes beyond temptation and weakness. It deals with our hurt, our joy, pain, loss, gain, happiness, tragedy. If God truly dwells in our spirit, and if our spirit is who we actually are as individuals, then God understands us in a way that no one else can. We go through experiences in life. He understands because he's living it too, right there with us. When we go through times of personal triumph, he celebrates with us, and when we go through times of tragedy and loss, he cries with us. And I really believe that. When we go through times of heartache and despair, he hurts with us. So not only does he do all of these things, but he also comforts us, strengthens us, and encourages us. We're never really alone. Now we know that as Christians we have eternal life, and we know that we'll all have to die someday. And again, we understand the basics of that. Our body dies, but our spirit lives on. But I believe that it actually goes deeper. If we keep in mind that time itself is a creation of God, so that means God himself is, as I said just a minute ago, he's outside of time, and he's also eternal. That means that eternity is not just a long expanse of time, or it's not even an infinite amount of time. If it were, it would mean that the inherent quality of God's eternality is something that he created outside of himself that could not have existed without him creating it. It would be like saying that God is love, yet love did not exist until God created it. It's a paradox that doesn't make sense. So as far as what eternity actually is, the best way that I can think about eternity, it's more of a place or a state of existence outside of what we would recognize as dimensional time. So the reason that we can never truly die is because the Spirit of God dwells in our spirit. Our physical body will die, but when that takes place, God brings us beyond the veil into eternity. And now what that exactly will look like, I can only speculate, but it's definitely something we can all look forward to. And I kind of have to laugh because I think I know why God wanted me to talk about this first, because it leads directly into the next thing. All of what I just said about the temple and the spirit was based on a blog that I wrote a pretty long time ago and haven't really thought anything about since. I had forgotten that it ended that way with the idea of God and eternity and time and really what heaven would be like. But it's something else that I talked about in quantum creation. But before I get to that aspect, is there anything that you guys wanted to say, or do you have any questions or anything?
I don't.
No, go ahead, sir.
Okay. All right, just wanted to make sure. Okay, so that does directly lead into this this thing here. This I wrote about it in quantum creation, and I've only talked about this, I think, on one other radio show. So I'm actually really excited to talk about this, because I think this is just one of the coolest things that God has for us, and what we have, what we can be hopeful for. Ephesians 2:5 through 6. This is often an overlooked passage. It says, "Even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Christ. By grace ye are saved, and hath raised us up together, and made us sit together in heavenly places with Jesus Christ." Now, that actually has profound importance, and not just in the way that we might think based on just a surface reading. A lot of times with passages like that, we tend to get the main idea, and then we keep reading without glossing over what might be important details. And that's okay. That saves stuff for later for us to discover. But verses like this can be simple on the surface, but a lot can be learned from a deeper study. And actually, the New King James, that quote was from the King James version. The New King James is a little easier to understand. It says, "Even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive." God made us alive together with Christ. By grace, you have been saved, and raised us up together, and made us sit together in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. So a lot of times when that's interpreted, it's taught that Jesus sees us as if we are already seated with him. But that's not actually what the text says. The text teaches this principle in past tense, portraying the fact that this has already happened. When we were dead, he made us alive together with Christ, and raised us up, and made us sit together in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. It's all past tense. So if we've accepted Jesus as our Savior, this is already done. So what exactly does that mean for Christians? It's usually looked as like a nice metaphor or a clever way to explain a certain principle, but many times in cases such as these, there's a deeper truth there. This passage, I believe, is more literal than what we might originally think. When we look at it closely, we realize that very direct and literal language is used. We don't see anywhere in there terms like as if or like. It's nowhere in the passage. It's directly saying that a literal event occurred when you and I accepted Jesus Christ as our Savior. We were literally seated in heaven with Jesus. So the Greek word for the idea of being raised together, it comes from synergio. I'm not a scholar. I don't know how to pronounce this stuff, so I'm probably butchering it. But it basically means to raise together, to cause to raise together, to raise up together from mortal death to a new and blessed life dedicated to God. So from that we can realize that we were, in a sense, born into death, but since we accepted Jesus' gift of salvation, we've been raised and seated in heaven. And also notice that the verse says that this happened to all of us together, implicating that it happened within the same instant. So what we're dealing with here is the same event in at least two, possibly more, separate dimensions, spatial dimensions, and really even outside of time. We've looked at we talked about extra dimensions before. So it seems whatever dimension describes heaven in the context of this passage, the physical and spiritual dimensions are what Ephesians 2:5-6 is dealing with. So in physical dimensionality, the three physical dimensions that we can experience here on earth, we accept Jesus as our Savior and we begin our new Christian life. But in the spiritual dimension, in heaven, it's something way more profound than we might realize, at first. It goes back to the idea that time, it not only may operate differently in heaven, but God himself is outside of time. So it's not a constant for God. He can exist outside of it and inside of it simultaneously. So every three-dimensional physical thing is stuck within the confines of time, and because of that, time is our reality. The spiritual dimension, or God's creation, it seems to be different. So, again, God can manipulate time, such as when John was able to feel the passage of about a half hour of time during his vision in Revelation 8. But God himself is outside of time. He would have to be. So the way that idea can apply to Ephesians 2:5-6 is it seems to be saying that we as Christians, and here's the big thing, the big twist of life, the big kicker, we are already in heaven. And that's going to sound really weird at first, but right now, as we're talking, and your listeners, as they're reading this, if we are secure in Jesus, we're already seated with Jesus in heaven. Now, of course, that's something that's occurring in a spiritual yet more real dimension. That's something that's outside of our physical timeline. We can't, apply that to our physical lives and think that we can just do whatever we want because it's already done in heaven. We can't do that. But let me see where I'm at here in my notes. But yeah, it's difficult for us to get our heads around. We're not supposed to be able to fully understand it because we're here in our limited three-dimensional perspective going along in the flow of time. But the Bible makes it clear that when we were saved, we were lifted into heaven. This indicates that we're already there. In a sense, it seems to convey the idea that in a way we're in two places at once, though we wouldn't normally realize it without the revelation from God through the Bible. So biblically speaking, eternity doesn't seem to describe an expanse of time, like I said before, but really more of a state of existence, like a spiritual location, and we're sealed because of that. So what's interesting, too, is that it says that we were raised together, and that also adds to the theory of us already being there, because God is outside of knowable time. When I was saved and when you were saved, we were raised together, even though we were saved at different times along the timeline. We were also raised together with the Apostle Paul when he accepted Jesus. In physical three-dimensional reality, we could point to a specific time when we were saved. However, on the other side, beyond the veil, where God is, it's all the same. We can share in it together. Three-dimensional space and time have no bearing concerning God and His construct. Time, it's not a constant there. So that's how we can be raised together at the same time, even with our ancient brothers and sisters that lived and died 2,000 years ago. And there's a lot that can be considered and a lot of questions that come up during that, like when John was caught up to heaven and he was given his vision of Revelation and he saw people that would be slain for their testimony in Jesus. When those people are slain in our future, will they personally witness John having his vision roughly 2,000 years prior? I don't know. It goes into a lot of different areas. A lot of it's theoretical and it is speculative. It's a different interpretation than we would ever really hear in church, but at the very least, it's an interesting thought concerning what I believe to be a biblical truth. We can see how God included examples of qualities in His creation, and when it does seem that God has embedded the potential for His obscure qualities of dual existence, within each and every one of us. We just need to accept Jesus as our Savior to partake in those qualities ourselves. So if this whole idea presented here, if it's true, it shows us even more of the sheer beauty and majesty of God, of Jesus, of our Lord Almighty. I don't believe any of us will fully know the ultimate depths of this idea until it's time that we escape our own physical existence. And this is something that I say in my book. In my deepest hope and sincerest belief, it will be then that each one of us who have found our salvation in Jesus Christ will wake up together, see our Lord, and finally realize for ourselves that we have been there the whole time.
Man, wow! All right,
that's a excellent thought. And as you said, it's very complex and hard for us to think of ourselves being in two places at once. You're not by far the only guest. You're one of many who have stated the same exact thing, and that we are dwelling in heaven with the Lord as we are here on earth. It certainly is a mind bender, but through the Lord all things are possible.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Amen.
Yeah.
And it's His word is, yeah.
This is.
No, I was just gonna say his.
Go ahead, sir.
Sorry, we keep interrupting each other. My apologies. I was just going to say, his word is so beautiful, and there are things in there that are warnings, things that we have to watch out for. But we can look at other areas such as this and get hope. That his word is so beautiful and transcends all dimensions in space that I can't read something like that and not get choked up every time I read it. It's amazing. But yeah, go right ahead.
Well, no, I think that what you've given to us and our audience tonight is, although it sounds extremely complex, and I suppose it in a way it is. This is, to me, what you've explained is science is actually proving the existence of God, and also not just the existence of God, but how we are interacting with God. And even although you didn't come out and we didn't discuss this tonight, how prayer works interdimensionally, how we're able to pray and communicate directly with God. And on the flip side of that, how the satanic aspect of this is able to infiltrate our temporal lives and set us up for potential deception if we're not made aware, or if we're not aware of the intricacies, I suppose would be a good word, of the multidimensional physics and quantum physics. I mean, the more we know about that, the better we are able to understand the complexity, yet eloquent and elegant simplicity of life. I don't know if I made sense, but I mean, it really kind of connects all of the dots together.
Absolutely, that makes perfect sense. I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, that really that's really good for me to hear, because you got it. I mean, that you got it, brother.
Well, this is perfect. I'll tell you, we are getting a lot of great emails from your appearance. People are just saying thank you so very much for explaining and taking the time to explain. The very it's kind of a minefield out there. Again, somewhat complicated. You're going to have to listen to this, folks, more than once. Go to Josh's website, and even better, pick up his two books, Cherubim, Chariots, and Quantum Creation. What you heard tonight really is kind of a synopsis of what Josh has written about and spoken about before. And listen to this again. Listen to this broadcast again. It'll make more sense. And listen to his previous broadcasts as well. But above all, grab his books, because you really, Josh really lays it out in very elegantly in his books. Josh, we've reached the end of the program. I just want to say thank you so much for your time, your gift of time, and man, you packed a lot of information into the 3 hours that we had.
Well, I did my best. I really appreciate you guys having me back on. It is always such a blessing for me to come on your show, talk to you guys, and really, I look at this as us having fellowship together. I really do, and I always get excited about that. So thank you again for sharing your show with me, sharing your time with me, and letting me talk about these things.
No problem. God bless.
Anytime, brother. You take care, and God bless you and your wife. Tell her we said hi.
God bless. Absolutely. God bless you and your families too. And yep, absolutely.
All right. That was Josh Peck, author, speaker, quantum creation, Cherubim, Chariots, and disclosure. He'll be a guest on again and has been a guest on previous times in the past. So it was a great show. And, go back and listen if you need to. I know I'm going to need to, because there was a lot said there. And if you're like my human brain, you only can comprehend so much at a time. With that, we are at the end of the broadcast. Next week, Ted Broyer Monday, Stan Tuesday, John Robertson on Hollywood Wednesday, and we'll go from there. Until then, stay safe, God bless, have a great weekend.
And all the dads out there, happy Father's Day.
I was just going to say, happy Father's Day.
All right.